Hello and welcome back. Today we look at the UK's worst criminals, members of UK grooming gangs and rings. The exposure of grooming gangs and rings in the UK has revealed harrowing patterns of organised child exploitation, often spanning years and involving multiple perpetrators operating with impunity. These crimes, uncovered in towns and cities such as Rotherham, Rochdale, Oxford and beyond, have not only devastated the lives of countless victims but also exposed systemic failures across law enforcement, social services and political leadership. In this video, we examine the profiles of individuals involved in these crimes, the structural conditions that enabled their actions, and the societal narratives that have shaped public understanding, often at the expense of nuanced justice and the victims themselves. This video was an extremely hard video to make, but I think it's important that the names and the faces of these criminals who commit these wicked crimes are exposed. I've also had to heavily censor myself as it's hard to talk about these sort of crimes on platforms. But let's get into the cases. Jasmine Hope, previously known as Melissa Noon, is a convicted offender whose case drew national attention due to its connection with an international ring operating out of Portsmouth, Hampshire. Her crimes committed alongside her partner, Robert Hathaway, involved the SA of children and the use of online platforms to facilitate and share material. The case not only exposed the horrifying reality of organised child exploitation, but also raised serious questions about digital safeguarding, sentencing and post-conviction monitoring. In 2011, Hope was convicted at the Portsmouth Crown Court for her involvement in the abuse of 2 children in the UK and 1 in Australia. She and Hathaway had created a forum website that served as a front for grooming and distributing indecent images. Hathaway, described as a ringleader, admitted to 45 charges, including R, and was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 10 years. Hope received a 4-year prison sentence for her role in the abuse. 3 other individuals involved in the ring who met Hathaway and Hope online and participated in the abuse were sentenced to a total of 15 years in prison. The Hampshire police investigation was sparked after Australian authorities uncovered a similar ring operating in Brisbane and Sydney that also abused at least 1 child. Hathaway had communicated with this Australian ring, sharing images, and one of the charges against Hope related to encouraging an Australian child to engage. Law enforcement uncovered approximately 2,000 pages of chat logs along with 14,000 images and 300 videos. Following her release, Hope was subject to a sexual harm prevention order which imposed strict conditions on her internet use and digital activity. However, in 2019 she was brought back before Southampton Crown Court after breaching this order by deleting her internet browsing history on her mobile phone. This act was a direct violation of the SHPO, which required her to retain all digital records for monitoring purposes. The court sentenced her to a 12-month prison term, suspended for 2 years. The 3 other defendants who became involved by connecting with Hathaway and Noon online were Stephen Fraser, 42, of Cambridge, who was sentenced to 4 years with an extended licence period of 6, Simon Hilton, 29, from North London, also sentenced to 4 years with a 6-year extension, and Lee Parson, 38, from Portsmouth, who received a 3-year term. Sajid Hussain, nicknamed Fish, was a member of the Huddersfield gang who fled before sentencing in 2018. He was convicted in his absence of 2 counts of R and sentenced to 17 years in prison, but disappeared 4 months before the verdict. His flight highlighted both the scale of the gang's crimes and the challenges of ensuring justice in such cases. He was convicted of 2 counts of R against a teenage girl. The victims were groomed with alcohol, substances and false promises of affection before being subjected to repeated crimes. His crimes were part of a wider campaign of exploitation involving at least 15 victims aged 11 to 17. The gang was described in court as a campaign of R, reflecting its organised nature. He disappeared in June 2018, 4 months before his trial concluded. He was convicted in his absence at Leeds Crown Court in October 2018. Judge Jeffrey Marson sentenced him to 17 years in prison, noting the seriousness of his offences. Police confirmed he had done a runner, sparking a manhunt that underscored the difficulties of securing justice when offenders abscond. He was one of 20 men convicted in 2018, with sentences totaling 221 years across the group. Victims and their families have expressed deep concern and frustration over the fact that he remains at large, despite his conviction and the serious charges against him. One of the victims, known as Girl L, along with her mother, has publicly called on law enforcement authorities to intensify their efforts to locate and apprehend him. UMAR ZAMAN is a 34-year-old from Huddersfield. He was convicted in 2019 of R-ing a teenage girl as part of the Huddersfield grooming gang uncovered by Operation Tendency. He fled to Pakistan before sentencing, but was later arrested in 2022 when he attempted to return to the UK. He is serving an 8-year prison sentence, with an additional 8 months for failing to surrender to bail. The case is tied to the largest grooming gang ever convicted in the United Kingdom. The Huddersfield Ring happened between 2004 and 2011, where dozens of men exploited vulnerable girls in West Yorkshire. He was one of the offenders identified during the operation. RASHID IQBAL is a convicted member of the Oxford gang. His crimes, along with those of his co-defendants, were part of a broader pattern that unfolded over nearly a decade in Oxford, targeting vulnerable girls, many of whom were in care or already known to social services. The case not only shocked the UK, but also exposed deep-rooted institutional failings in policing, child protection and community accountability. IQBAL was one of 7 men convicted in 2013 following a major investigation by Thames Valley Police, known as Operation Bullfinch. The trial revealed that the group had groomed, trafficked and essayed girls as young as 11. Victims were often plied with substances and alcohol and subjected to SA. IQBAL himself was found guilty of multiple counts of R and conspiracy to engage in activity with a child. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his role. The Oxford case was particularly significant because it mirrored patterns seen in other towns such as Rotherham and Rochdale, where groups of men, often of Pakistani heritage, targeted white British girls. The convictions of Robert Bailey and KEVAN Tudor represent a deeply disturbing chapter in the UK's history of exploitation. Both men were found guilty of essaying vulnerable boys in Birmingham as part of a broader pattern of grooming and exploitation that spanned decades. Their crimes and the institutional failures surrounding them underscore the urgent need for vigilance, survivor-centred justice, and the long-term safeguarding reform. In 2016, Bailey and Tudor were sentenced at Warwick Crown Court following a 12-week trial that revealed the essay of 2 teenage boys between 2002 and 2010. The victims, both of whom had experienced instability and were known to social services, were groomed, manipulated and subjected to the crimes. Tudor, then 55, was sentenced to 9 years in prison for multiple offences, including activity with a child. Bailey received a 7-year sentence for his role. Tudor's crimes did not end there. A former football coach, he had used his position of trust to target boys with promises of trials at professional clubs. In 2022, while already serving his sentence, he admitted to 17 additional child offences, including SA dating back to the early 1980s. One victim came forward after reading about his conviction in the press, revealing that he had been SA'd at the age of 12. Tudor was sentenced to a further 10 years in prison. Bailey's involvement was linked to the exploitation of a boy who was in local authority care, specifically between 2005 and 2010. His crimes, like Tudor's, contributed to a total of 68 years of imprisonment handed down to the 10 men convicted in this case, with one receiving a life sentence. One victim, aged 15 at the time of the offences, was in care and went missing in December 2009. During his disappearance, police investigations revealed that he had been seen begging at New Street train station before being seen leaving with an older man, later identified as Stephen Kelly, a 39-year-old unemployed man. Kelly was arrested and found to have essayed the boy during the 10 days he was missing, selling him to other men. However, at that time, insufficient evidence prevented further charges against Kelly. In 2010, the same boy ran away multiple times from his care home amid concerns of ongoing exploitation. He was placed in secure accommodation where he received counselling. During this process, he disclosed further SA, particularly involving Tahir Hassan, aged 34, whom he had met in February 2010. The boy claimed Hassan trafficked him to other men, subjected him to additional SA. Hassan was served with a harbouring notice in August 2010 and was arrested in 2011, though he denied the allegations and no further police action was taken against him at that time. Further investigations uncovered that in August 2010, the boy was found in a Birmingham hotel room with Michael Godbold, a 58-year-old student photographer from Shepherd's Bush. Allegations emerged that Godbold had previously essayed the boy and taken images of him. He was arrested in November 2010 but denied the allegations, and no charges were filed. In 2013, West Midlands Police conducted a review of the case, which involved re-examining evidence and re-interviewing the victim, who was then 18. The victim provided new details that led to the identification of 12 men involved in the SA, including Stephen Kelly, Tudor, and caretaker Peter Joynes, aged 58. The review also revealed that Ronald Potter, a retired farm manager and former police special constable, had essayed the boy in 2002 and 2003 when he was 15 and homeless. Potter was charged with 2 counts of assault. Other men identified as perpetrators included Ian Preslerton, Alan Priest, Ashley Sherrington, and Michael Godbold. The police also uncovered additional victims and linked them to the same offenders. In addition to Tudor and Bailey, other men received significant sentences. Hassan was sentenced to 7 years for SA with a child. Stephen Kelly received 8 years for selling a child and engaging in SA. Peter Joynes was sentenced to 4 years for similar offences. Ronald Potter received 3 years for indecent assault, while Ian Presselton and Alan Priest received 3 years each for offences. Ashley Sherrington was sentenced to 9 years for R, and Michael Godbold received 11 years for multiple charges. Their convictions, though long overdue, offer a measure of justice and a stark reminder of the need for proactive safeguarding, survivor support and institutional reform. AMERE SINGH, DHALIWAL, a former fast food worker from Huddersfield, was convicted in 2018 as a central figure in one of the UK's most extensive grooming cases. His crimes, committed over a 7-year period, involve the systemic SA of vulnerable girls, some as young as 11, who were groomed, trafficked and subjected to extreme psychological and physical abuse. His conviction marked a turning point in public understanding of organised exploitation and the institutional failures that allowed it to persist. He was found guilty of 54 offences against 11 girls, including trafficking and inciting selling. Prosecutors described him as an S offender who manipulated victims by showering them with attention, substances and alcohol before subjecting them to repeated abuse. He often passed victims to other men in the gang and filmed the assaults and took images. Judge Jeffrey Marson said his treatment of the girls was inhumane and sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years. He refused to admit involvement and insisted the girls were fabricating stories because he called one of them fat. At his trial, it was heard that his crimes may have started as early as 2004, with a girl teen referred to as Girl A who believed he was already essaying other underage girls before she came forward. He is 35 years old and is currently serving his sentence at Doncaster Prison. He will not be able for parole until April 14, 2036, and upon release he will remain on a lifelong licence. The Huddersfield grooming gang operated between 2004 and 2011, and their crimes were uncovered through Operation Tendency. In total, 20 men were convicted in 2018 across 3 trials, with sentences totalling over 220 years. By 2023, the number of convicted perpetrators had risen to 42, making it the largest gang prosecution in UK history. A 2024 report revealed, like many of these cases, that 15 of the 22 girls involved have prior contact with social care. In the city of Glasgow, 7 individuals were convicted of crimes involving the SA of minors. The defendants, which include 5 men and 2 women, were found guilty in a trial that is believed to be the largest prosecution of a child SA ring in Scotland's history. The convictions were handed down following months of detailed investigation and courtroom proceedings that uncovered a pattern of depravity and violence. Among those convicted are John Clark, along with others named Lannery, Brannan, Williams, Owens and Marianne Gallagher. The court heard that these individuals engaged in a series of acts, included SA and attempted murder. Specifically, Owens, Lannery, Brannan and Williams were found guilty of attempting to take the life of a young girl by pushing her into a microwave and trapping her in various locations. Gallagher, a woman involved in the case, was convicted of assaulting the girl. Her sentence was deferred for a year on the grounds of good behaviour, and she was released on bail pending further proceedings. In addition to this conviction, the court acquitted 3 other defendants: Mark Carr, aged 50, Richard Gatku, aged 45, and Leona Laying, aged 51, who were found not guilty of the charges brought against them. The trial held at Glasgow Crown Court revealed that the victims, 2 girls and a boy, all under the age of 13 at the time, were subjected to repeated acts of violence and SA over a period spanning from 2012 to 2019. The SA was described as both violent and explicit, with the perpetrators using substances openly in front of the children and forcing them to consume them. Ian Owens, 46, Elaine Lannery, 40, Leslie Williams, 43, Paul Brannan, 42, Scott Forbes, 51, Barry Watson, 48, and John Clark, 49, were jailed for between 8 and 20 years and handed orders for lifelong restrictions. Judge Lord Beckett told the gang, whose jail sentence totalled more than 93 years, that they may never be released from prison. He said, "This court is used to hearing the worst examples of human behaviour, but such depravity towards young children is beyond my experience. This is not typical behaviour, and such extreme SA of children seems to be rare." He praised the formidable strength of the children and their courage despite threats from Owens. The trial heard that the children first came into contact with social work in Glasgow in August 2017 and were deemed to be at risk in July 2018, but the allegations of violence and SA did not come to light until March 2020. Police were alerted by a man who had got to know the children. One of the victims became hysterical when she mistakenly thought she had been shut in a room. The man and his wife then documented details of what the children recalled happening at the hands of the gang. All members denied committing any of the crimes. MANZOOR AKHTAR and SHAQEEL HUSSAIN were both convicted as part of the notorious Huddersfield gang investigation. AKHTAR was jailed for R-ing a 13-year-old girl, while Hussain received sentencing for R-ing a 14-year-old and indecently assaulting a 16-year-old. Their convictions highlight the scale of the child SA in Yorkshire between 1995 and 2011. AKHTAR became the 35th member of the gang to be jailed, part of a wider investigation that has resulted in sentences totalling more than 380 years across multiple offenders. Hussain from Dewsbury had already been sentenced to 8 years in prison for R-ing a 14-year-old girl in 2020. He admitted to indecently assaulting a 16-year-old girl between 2004 and 2005, leading to an extra 12 months added to his sentence. Alexandra BUGONEA was part of a Romanian gang that operated in Dundee alongside 4 male accomplices: Marcia Marian Compensu, Christian Ultralatini, Remus Stan and Catalin Dorbury. Their crimes were uncovered during Operation Reclaw, a police investigation launched in 2021 to dismantle human trafficking networks in Tayside. Vulnerable women, some trafficked into Scotland, were coerced into becoming ladies of the night. Victims were plied with substances and alcohol, creating dependency that the gang exploited. The gang committed multiple Rs, with BUGONEA complicit in facilitating and participating in the exploitation. Victims were manipulated with promises of wealth, then trapped in cycles of addiction and abuse. Her role, though less dominant, was crucial in maintaining the gang's operation and ensuring victims remained under control. The trial at the High Court in Glasgow lasted 6 weeks and involved testimony from 10 victims. On the 9th of January 2025, she and her co-defendants were found guilty of a range of offences, including R and trafficking. On the 27th of October 2025, she was sentenced to 8 years in prison. She was also placed on the S offender register for life, reflecting the seriousness of her crimes. Her co-defendants received longer sentences: 24 years, 18 years, 12 years and 10 years. PRABHAT NELLI was one of 18 men convicted in Newcastle in 2017 following Operation Sanctuary, a major investigation into gangs operating in the northeast of England. The case revealed how vulnerable girls and young women were targeted, manipulated and essayed over several years. Nelly and others were found guilty of offences including R, trafficking and conspiracy to incite them selling themselves. Victims, some as young as 14, were plied with substances and alcohol and false promises of affection. The gang operated as a network, sharing victims and normalising the exploitation. Operation Sanctuary uncovered nearly 100 offences committed between 2011 and 2014. His conviction was part of a broader crackdown that exposed failures in safeguarding vulnerable young people. In August 27, he was convicted alongside other men of Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Iraqi, Iranian and Turkish origin. The trials highlighted how cultural taboos, victim vulnerability and institutional blind spots allowed SA to persist for years. Sentences across the group totaled hundreds of years in prison. At court, he was handed a 4-year sentence. Omar SAFDAR, a 30-year-old man from Oldham, was convicted in 2022 as part of the Keeley grooming gang in West Yorkshire. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison for the repeated R of a teenage girl between 2008 and 2009 when she was aged 14 to 16. His crimes formed part of a wider investigation that saw multiple men jailed for child SA. The gang exploited the victims' vulnerability. Like all the other ones we have listed today, they used substances and alcohol. The men acted both individually and collectively, again normalising the cycle. The victim was described as extremely troubled and tormented, highlighting how predators deliberately targeted those least able to resist. He was tried at Bradford Crown Court as part of 2 linked trials under the Crown Prosecution Service's investigation. In February 2022, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison, alongside other offenders including Nazir Khan, Hassan Pasharat, Baba Hussain and Imran Sabir. Collectively, the group received almost 50 years in prison for their crimes. Shabir Ahmed, a former taxi driver and welfare rights officer employed by Oldham Council, emerged as the central figure in the Rochdale child SA scandal. His position within the community gave him a veneer of respectability, but behind this facade he orchestrated one of the UK's most notorious networks. Ahmed exploited vulnerable girls, many from troubled backgrounds, between the late 1990s and early 2000s. The victims were as young as 13. They were odd and trafficked to other men, often in exchange for money or favours. Ahmed demanded victims call him daddy, a chilling tactic that reinforced his dominance and warped their sense of trust. In 2012, he was convicted at Liverpool Crown Court of multiple counts of trafficking and conspiracy to engage in activity with minors. He received a 22-year sentence, one of the longest handed down in gang cases. During the trial, he attempted to deflect blame, claiming his crimes were the fault of Western society for allowing girls to parade on the streets. Reports later revealed that Ahmed had been employed by Oldham Council as a welfare rights officer, even while concerns about his behaviour were raised. Police failed to inform his employers of his arrest for SA, a lapse that may have allowed further SA to occur. These failures underscored systemic weaknesses in safeguarding and accountability. EBRAHIM PANDOR, a 44-year-old man from Dewsbury, was convicted in July 2024 as part of West Yorkshire Police Operation Torway. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison for trafficking a minor, offences committed between 2004 and 2012 against a girl aged 13 to 14. His case formed part of a wider investigation into historic SA in Kirklees, which has seen 28 men jailed for nearly 400 years in total. The conviction of him is tied to one of the largest exploitation investigations. The inquiry uncovered widespread SA of vulnerable girls between 1999 and 2012. Pandor's crimes were part of a broader pattern of exploitation which shocked communities and exposed safeguarding failures. He trafficked a girl when she was 13 years old, moving her into situations where she was vulnerable to SA. The victim was later odd by another offender, Amjad Hussain, when she was 18, showing how exploitation often escalated over years. His actions were not isolated but part of a network of men who preyed on vulnerable young females across Kirklees. In July 2024, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. His co-defendant, Amjad Hussain, was sentenced in his absence to 10 years for while police continuing efforts to locate him. Together, their convictions added to the tally of 28 men jailed under Operation Torway, with the combined sentences totalling nearly 400 years. Mohammed AKRAM has been convicted twice, first as part of the Huddersfield gang, where he AR'd and essayed a young girl between 2004 and 2011, and second in Scotland, where he was sentenced in 2024 to a lifelong restriction order for a string of and physical assaults against 3 women, including a pregnant victim. The name AKRAM is associated with multiple serious offences. His crimes span both historic child SA in Huddersfield and violent assaults in Scotland. Together, they illustrated a pattern of predatory behaviour across decades, targeting vulnerable victims and leaving lasting trauma. Then aged 33, he was convicted in 2019 alongside Usman Khalid for essaying a girl known as Girl N. The victim was 11 years old when first groomed by the Huddersfield gang, who abducted her from her care home. AKRAM, nicknamed Kid, essayed her when she was 12 and AR'd her when she was between 19 to 20. He was sentenced to part of a collective 27 years in prison handed down to him and Khalid. PARVAZE Ahmed, a 36-year-old from Bradford, was convicted in 2019 of 3 counts of R against a vulnerable teenage girl. He was sentenced to 17 years in prison as part of a wider Bradford gang investigation, which saw 9 men jailed for a combined 132 years. In 2020, more than £50,000 of his assets were seized under the Proceeds of Crime Act due to his dealing and money laundering activities. His case is tied to the Bradford gang, one of several high-profile child SA cases in West Yorkshire. Ahmed, known as Pav, was among 9 men convicted of essaying 2 teenage girls who had been placed in care. In March 2019, his Facebook account closed after it was recently updated. His social media profile under the name Jimmy Khan was believed to have been updated on a Tuesday, showing a shared photograph from September of the previous year. The image depicted Ahmed with another man, accompanied by the caption, "Brotherhood, no justice, no peace." The post quickly gained attention, with friends of Ahmed liking and loving it. One even commented that he was looking good. Concerned members of the public alerted the local newspaper, prompting them to contact the Ministry of Justice. A resident expressed concern, saying, "It's not right he has a phone. His account should not be active to post anything after his crime." A prison service spokesperson stated, "We do not tolerate the use of mobile phones in prisons, and the account has been removed from Facebook at our request." ARSHID HUSSAIN, a ringleader of the Rotherham gang, was convicted in 2016 of multiple counts of assault and abduction of children. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison, one of the longest terms ever handed down in a UK child exploitation case. Between 1997 and 2013, an estimated 1,400 children were essayed in Rotherham. At the centre of this scandal was Hussain, described by prosecutors as the main player in a network of men who AR'd and terrorised vulnerable girls. His crimes were exposed following years of investigative journalism, survivor testimony and police inquiries. He operated alongside his brothers Basharat and Banaras, forming a family-based gang that normalised the SA and shared victims. Victims were often plied with alcohol and substances, as well as gifts, again trapped in cycles of dependency. In February 2016, he was convicted at Sheffield Crown Court of 23 offences, including assault and abduction. He was sentenced to 35 years. His brothers and associates also received lengthy sentences, with one brother jailed for 25 years and another for 19. The judge described his actions as vile and wicked, noting the devastating impact on victims. In June 2022, South Yorkshire Police faced serious criticism for their handling of an incident involving him. The police had offered Hussain a no-arrest deal after he abducted a pregnant 14-year-old girl, a decision that has since been scrutinised amid ongoing investigations into police misconduct related to the Rotherham scandal. Investigations into the police response concluded that South Yorkshire Police did not act appropriately in this case, with a formal complaint from the victim upheld. The court also convicted Asif Ali, along with 5 other men, for essaying a girl in a separate trial. The victim first approached police in 2003, but her case was dropped due to intimidation. It was only in 2013 that she returned to authorities, motivated by the ongoing investigations into historic SA in Rotherham. Her reports led to his arrest and subsequent conviction, when he was sentenced to 35 years after being found guilty of 23 offences against 9 victims. He has consistently denied all charges, but the court's verdict confirmed his extensive criminal conduct and leadership role in the network in Rotherham. Carolann Gallen was from Newcastle and was the only woman convicted in the major gang investigation known as Operation Sanctuary. In 2017, she was sentenced to 12 years in prison for trafficking girls for SA. Her role was to lure vulnerable victims into situations where they were SA'd by men. She exploited the trust of victims, often befriending them before introducing them to SAers. While not the ringleader, her actions enabled the gang's crimes, making her a crucial link in the chain of SA. She was tried alongside multiple men in Newcastle Crown Court in 2017. She was convicted of trafficking offences relating to 3 teenage girls. As I said, the judge sentenced her to 12 years in prison. She was described as utterly corrupted by the gang culture, but the court emphasised that her gender did not lessen her culpability. James Evans, aged 38, has been handed a life sentence by a court with a minimum term of 18 years before he is able for parole. The sentencing follows a series of serious allegations related to misconduct that have brought him into the criminal justice system. In addition to his imprisonment, Evans has been subjected to a lifelong harm prevention order. The case has garnered significant attention within the local community of Walsall, where residents are now grappling with the implications of the sentencing and the nature of the crimes. Evans was one of 21 people who were convicted for their parts in the largest ever SA case investigated by West Midlands Police. The offending against 7 children who were 12 years old or younger took place over nearly a decade in Walsall and Wolverhampton. The SA came to light after concerns were raised following a hospital visit by one of the victims. 13 of the defendants have been jailed. As previously stated, James Evans was handed 18 years. David Baker, 41, was jailed for 20 years. Mark Smith, 34, for 19 years with a further 6 years on licence. Natalie Wellington, who was 44, was jailed for 16 years. Tracy Baker, 41, was jailed for 15 years. Kirsty Webb, 36, jailed for 10 years. Philip Wellington, 50, jailed for 8 years. Anne Clare, 43, jailed for 8 years. Pamela Howes, 58, jailed for 7 years. Lee Webb, 40, jailed for 6 years. David Evans, 72, jailed for 3.5 years. Jason Evans, 25, jailed for 2 years and 6 months. Luke Baker, 22, jailed for 2 years and 4 months. Stephen Webb, 65, given an absolute discharge due to health conditions and told he must notify as an offender for 5 years. Dean Webb, 35, received a 2-year supervision order. Jane Evans, 71, given a 2-year supervision order. Ryan Evans, 23, given a community order for 3 years. Natasha Webb, 37, to be sentenced at a further date. Matthew Evans, 32, a further date. John Griffin and Violet Griffin to a further date. And that concludes our video today. Obviously, there will be more videos as this is just a start. Unfortunately, there are so many convictions. This was a really hard video to make, but I think it's really important that their faces are seen by the public. As always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.